Like any other watch brand, Seiko release a bunch of new models and new designs every year. Some are new designs, some are inspired by older designs, and some are the result of collaborations. This one comes from the latter, and it's a little watch that made a big splash. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're looking at a watch that came from a collaboration between Seiko and another Japanese brand, Nano Universe. They've done quite a few collaborations together, but this model is probably one of the more well known. Being a very limited run doesn't hurt either. This is the SZQV020. Does it look familiar? If you were into watches around the beginning of 2022, you'd be hard-pressed not to have heard or seen this one floating around. It has the vintage charm and good looks from a retro-inspired design and measurements to match. However, once we had more than just the press shots to rely on, and the watch actually released in the hands of the public, there were some warning people not to set their expectations too high. So, it's time to see if they were right, or if it was all just fear-mongering. First things first, we need some context. Why did the watch make such big waves when it was announced? What was the price and availability like? Why would you need to lower your expectations? Well, I think a big part of the reason that this watch made people so excited when it was announced is the design. While it is its own watch, it does bear more than just a passing resemblance to a vintage watch from a big Swiss brand that is very, very expensive to buy if you want a good example. Seiko took some of the elements, such as the hour markers and creamy lume color, as well as the pop of an orange hand against a matte black dial, and made it accessible to the masses in a contemporary package. Well, yes and no. The accessible, that is. The price definitely was. On release in Japan, this watch cost less than $300 US. However, as Seiko so likes to do, this model was a limited edition release, and only 300 pieces were made. Now, technically it was a JDM release, but the way that the internet is, you could still try and purchase this watch from outside Japan through a variety of online shops. That said, with 300 to go around, they sold out pretty quickly. So, affordable, but not readily available, which, whether you like it or not, automatically makes it more desirable. And finally, we can look at why you might need to lower your expectations. Well, I'm not too sure about this one, to be honest. There was nothing really about the watch that I wasn't expecting, and nothing to set my expectations higher either. However, the things people were being warned about was that this watch has hollow end links, folded links, a pressed clasp, and a quartz movement inside. All bar the movement are present in Seiko's 5 sports collection, so personally, I'm not sure why these would be things you would warn people about. At the price this watch was, it comes with the territory. And when I received this watch, I was not disappointed at all. I was quite pleased with it actually. It feels like you'd expect, and the build is appropriate for the style and time period that this watch is trying to emulate. Perhaps what sent people's expectations sky high for this watch was the clear design inspiration from a big Swiss brand, as well as the limited availability driving up hype and resellers charging over the retail price on the second-hand market. Okay, that took a bit longer than I expected. You're here to look at the watch after all, so let's get into it. The dial is the main attraction with this watch. Ignoring the question of homage versus original, it's just a pleasant looking design. The matte black of the dial is not a deep black, and it's more like a faded charcoal grey. It has the look of a dial that might have been black a long time ago, but has been out in the sun and weather long enough to give it some character. The colour of the lume is the same. It's not crisp white like on most modern watches. Instead, it too looks like it's been out in the elements and aged to perfection. Compared to the cardinal markers, the rest of the hours are very small in size, but I think that works in the watch's favour to help it feel a bit bigger. You'll see how important that is later when we look at the measurements. Everything is printed rather than applied, and generally, it's simple, straightforward and uncluttered. Except that is, for all the text below the pinion. Did Seiko really have to put special edition on the front? At least it's smaller than all the other text. The only thing that stands out on the dial is the date window at 3. I'm not opposed to the date, I just wish they'd put a little more effort into it. I can't help but think how much better the watch would look if Seiko had matched the wheel with the lume colour. Instead, we get a white date wheel that makes its presence very known. The hands on this watch are a bit of a Frankenstein from the original reference 1655 model that is being homaged. The lollipop of the second hand has slipped down to become a counterbalance, and the orange arrowhead GMT hand has become the hour hand. To me, it kind of looks like all 3 individual hands came from different sets. The lollipop counterbalance is a bit too big, the minute hand is a bit too narrow, and that hour hand is, well, you can see it. By no means is that a complaint though. I find it a bit amusing and enjoyable. When reading about this watch, I saw a comment that said it looks like something a modder might build, and I can definitely see that. Moving out a little to the case, let's check out those measurements. I mentioned before about the dial helping the watch feel bigger. It needs it considering the diameter of the case is just 35mm. Personally, I have no problem with that size, but I know others will. It's a vintage size to match the vintage looks. Height is taller than you might expect for a quartz-powered watch at 11.4mm, and lug-to-lug is quite compact at 42. Overall, it's clearly on the smaller side, but smaller sizes are coming back into fashion, so more and more people could get away with it. The space between those lugs is a slightly inconvenient 19mm, which reduces your options for strap replacements. In terms of case design and finishing, it's kind of interesting. Not the actual design or finishing themselves, but the fact that it's one that Seiko doesn't generally do. With the polished bezel and slightly curved case sides, it too bears a striking resemblance to the case of another watch made by that same Swiss brand. It's got a relatively flat side profile, but since that lug-to-lug is so short, it doesn't really matter. One nice thing to note, however, is the box-domed crystal covering the dial. It may only be hardlex rather than sapphire, but it's a very nice piece of hardlex. If you reach some extreme angles, there is a lot of distortion, which tells us that it's single dome rather than double dome. From the side here we get a look at an unsigned crown that does not screw down. We can also see some jeweled lugs to make changing straps easier if you do happen to have some 19mm ones lying around. Turning a little more, and we get a look at the back of the watch. The caseback does screw down, and helps to give the watch 100 meters of water resistance. Being a limited edition collaboration watch, the caseback is etched with the Nano Universe logo, and a number out of 300. I was lucky enough to get number 10. Collectors seem to like low numbers, and this is both low and a nice round number, so I'm pretty happy. We can also see those hollow end links mentioned earlier, but they feel very solid and don't have any play, so they're not really an issue for me. Onto the bracelet though, and we have probably the one actual complaint I have with the watch. It's not a big one, and I can live with it, but I'm not a huge fan of the polished mid-links on the bracelet. I generally prefer watches that aren't too flashy, and not that this one is, but the big polished sections running down the bracelet do catch and reflect the light. The other reason is that polished surfaces scratch much more readily, whereas a brushed bracelet would look newer for longer. The sides of the bracelet are polished, and there we also see that faint line running down each link where it was folded. Seiko do a good job these days on their folded bracelets. They've come a long way since the old Seiko 5s. Finally we come to the clasp. It's not particularly big or long, and so only has room for 2 positions of micro adjustment. It's also pressed like I mentioned earlier, but at least it has the Seiko logo stamped into the outside. It does its job well with the 2-button release, and a bigger, bulkier clasp would have felt out of place. Okay, let's get it on wrist and see how it wears. This watch is definitely one of the smallest sized watches in my collection, but I don't feel like it's too small. The smaller size and lighter weight actually make it really comfortable to wear. As I turn my wrist, you can see the bezel and those mid-links catch the light. Some people might think it's too small even for my wrist, but I keep coming back to that vintage style and design, so to me at least, the size looks appropriate. Because of that smaller size and weight, I wear it a little more loose than some of my other watches too. There's one thing I haven't covered yet, that's the movement. It's a 7N42 quartz movement ticking away inside here. The purists out there will probably be wishing it was an automatic, but I don't mind this at all. It's only an occasional wear piece for me, so the fact that it's going to be running and ready to go any time I feel like wearing it is nice. If it really bothers you that much, you could always mod or build a very similar looking watch with an automatic movement. All in all, it's a cool little watch that looks like a vintage Swiss one and came from a collaboration between two Japanese companies. Don't pay the reseller prices, if there are many still around, and you definitely won't be disappointed. It's got the look and feel of a vintage watch with the reliability of a modern quartz movement. Best of both worlds if you ask me. What do you think about this watch? Did you want to get your hands on one of these when they were initially released? Did you buy into the hype? Is it still overrated? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.